Season 6 of How I Met Your Mother has some of the best standalone and plot-significant episodes in the entire series. Along with developing and moving every character arc, makes it a very important season. Hello everyone, this is the glass half full. And like I said before, today we're discussing and reviewing Season 6 of How I Met Your Mother. If you're new here, I basically review every single episode of the season and review the season as a whole and the good and bad afterwards. So get your pen and paper, and today our food choice is tissues. I'm not gonna eat the tissues, and you shouldn't either, but I'm gonna need them by the end of the season, and you'll see why. So without further ado, let's begin. Season 6, Episode 1, Big Days. This season premiere has a much more different cold open than the rest. It's not some recap or narration of older Ted speaking, but instead, it's a scene in the distant future where we have Ted and Marshall at a wedding. Not even 1 minute 30 into the season, and so many questions have been presented to us. But right before we get any answers to them, we cut back to the present day where we see Ted and Barney arguing over a girl at McLaren's. Now this episode has many different plot lines, like Robin not being over Dawn and Ted seeing Cindy again, the mother's roommate. But most importantly is Lily and Marshall's plot line, where Marshall told his dad that he's trying to have a baby. Now this reintroduces the Ericksons back into the story after being absent for a long time, and you can tell that they're going to play a bigger role in this season. The final scene actually answers one of our questions from the start of the episode and states that the groom wants to talk to Ted, meaning this is not Ted's wedding. Honestly, this is one of my favorite season premieres. I just like all the plot lines, and it sets up the season quite perfectly. Plus, I really like the scenes at the beginning and the end. It gives this season premiere a more unique feel, and I think it benefits it greatly. I give it a great. Season 6, Episode 2, Cleaning House. The gang help Barney and his family clean out his childhood home. This seems to be an average episode at first, until Barney finds an old letter from his dad. And even though Barney's mom tried so hard to keep Barney and James's dad out of their lives, she eventually gives the address for one of their father's homes. And so Barney and James, and the rest of the gang for plot relevant reasons, go and meet one of their dads. And sadly for Barney, it was James's dad. But that didn't stop him from thinking that was his true father. And because how Barney thinks this is his father, he says some very, very controversial things, to the point where this episode, if it was made today, would be cancelled. Like multiple times. Hell, Barney's character as a whole would be cancelled. But that's a topic for another day. Now at the end of the episode, Barney comes to terms that he wasn't his true father. But that's when Loretta offers Barney a chance to meet his dad. But he declines it. He knew how much his mother did to make his childhood happy, and accompanied by one of my favorite songs, Stand By Me, makes for one of the greatest scenes in the show. And although Barney will finally meet his dad later on, this is a pretty great ending. This episode's damn near perfect, and I really love the scenes with Barney, his mom, James, and James's dad. And I just find it really cool how we don't even see most of those characters that much in the show, but they leave such a lasting impact in this episode. I still find it funny how the gang was just kind of there and didn't really contribute anything to the plot. But regardless, this is a legendary episode. Season 6, Episode 3, Unfinished. Ted is given another chance to fulfill his lifelong dream of building a building. Damn, that still sounds weird. As Barney tells him that the GMB project is back on. Ted originally declines because he feels accomplished as a professor and overall doesn't like GMB, but he realizes he may very well never feel complete as an architect unless he seeks his dream through. This is great enough for Ted, but I find it kind of weird how they never explain how the GMB project is back on. Especially if Bilson hated Ted's design so much, who's nowhere to be found now. I don't know, it's always bothered me, and I considered it a pretty big plot hole. Anyways, I give this episode a good. Season 6, Episode 4, Subway Wars. This episode really makes me want to visit New York someday. It seems pretty cool. Especially if you have guys like Ranjit around. I give this episode a good. Season 6, Episode 5, Architect of Destruction. Ted finds out that the new GMB building is going to replace the Arcadian, an old relic of New York. And of course, being the architect fanatic he is kind of sad to see it go. Especially after he meets his new soon-to-be girlfriend, Zoe.
Zoe is a douchebag. There's no other way to put it. Zoe's actively trying to save the Arcadian, while Ted is reluctantly trying to destroy the Arcadian.
Season 6, Episode 6, Baby Talks. Pretty funny episode where we find out Marshall really wants to have a boy while Lily really wants to have a girl. I give this episode an okay. Season 6, Episode 7, Canning Randy.
Zoe is back and she's still a douchebag.
Mostly because she turns Ted's class against him because of the whole GMB thing.
Like, come on, Zoe. Okay, you can get mad at Ted for destroying your little building or whatever, but don't turn his class against him. Other than that, this episode's okay.
Season 6, Episode 8, Natural History.
Zoe's here yet again, and guess what, guys? She's a bigger douchebag.
Before I get into why, the gang go to a museum where they meet the one and only Captain. And what's significant about him is that, you know, back in Season 1 when Ted woke up with the pineapple on his dresser?
Well, we find out, not in this episode, but in a deleted scene, that Ted stole it from the Captain's house. This has no plot relevance whatsoever, but hey, I need to share my How I Met Your Mother lore somehow.
Anyway, the story then splits off into 3 different plot lines, all 3 of them being pretty significant. First one is Robin and Barney touching artifacts.
Wow, that also sounds really weird when I say it out loud.
Where, after being caught, Barney indirectly finds out who his father is, after a security guard looks at his past record. And Marshall is accepting the fact that he's most likely gonna stay at GMB, and is trying to make Lily accept that as well. And finally, Zoe blackmails Ted into saying he hates GMB.
Like I said, Zoe equals douchebag.
Despite what Zoe has done in the past few episodes, Ted still somewhat respects her for what she thinks is right, which I guess is classic Ted. I honestly have to give this episode a legendary, more so because this episode sets up a lot of future plot lines in the season, and it's overall a fun standalone episode. Plus, we meet the Captain. Season 6, Episode 9, Glitter. Ted and his high school friend Punchy share a pretty nice moment as he asks Ted to be his best man at his wedding. Perhaps it was the same wedding that Ted and Marshall were at the start of the season. Also, we find out that Robin's old TV show indicates some very sexual, how do I say this, innuendos.
Like I said before, this show is rated PG!
I give this episode a great. Season 6, Episode 10, BLITZGIVING.
Oh, wait.
So, I love this episode, you love this episode, and everyone who's a fan of the show loves this episode. So many good lines like the Turkey and the gentleman, and the term blitzed out is still something me and my friends quote till this day. But the only thing keeping this episode from being absolutely perfect is the fact that the gang became friends with Zoe. I get it was for plot-related reasons or whatever, but come on, they became friends with her so easily. Like seriously, after everything she's done to Ted, they just ignore that and they act like it never happened? Honestly, just a really awful move, which kind of got glossed over. Nonetheless, this is still a legendary episode. Season 6, Episode 11, The Mermaid Theory. Something that I noticed throughout the series is that all the members of the gang can be put into duos amongst themselves and work quite well. For example, Ted and Marshall or Barney and Lily. However, the one duo that's been really underutilized is Marshall and Robin, and the writers know this as well based on the premise of this episode. And another thing I want to note is that for the first time in the series, Ted forgets the story in this episode, which is mostly played for laughs, but when you really think about it, since Ted in the present is pretty old, that means it's really likely that all the plot holes in the series can almost always be explained by the fact that Ted mostly forgot what happened just because of how memory loss can relate to aging and whatnot.
Now, plot holes have basically played almost every single TV show, movie, etc. But I find it pretty cool how Your Mother can basically find a way to overwrite all of that. Yeah, and the episode's okay, I guess. There's nothing much to talk about, but it does bring up some pretty interesting discussions, huh?
Season 6, Episode 12, False Positive. This episode really reminds me of the Season 4 episode, 3 Days of Snow, mostly because of how all the plot lines center on the fact that the gang think Lily is pregnant. The most significant part of this episode, though, is Robin finally gets a job at a very respected news channel, Worldwide News. And Ted is a really good friend for what he does at the last part of the episode. I give this episode a great. Season 6, Episode 13, Bad News, and Season 6, Episode 14, Last Words.
Look, it's no use beating around the bush. These two episodes are some of the best and the most heartbreaking episodes the whole series has to offer. And it's obvious they need a whole other video in order to truly do them justice.
However, I can't simply just gloss over them, so I'll do a smaller bare bones review here. Marshall and Lily are kinda worried that one of them might be infertile. So, they go to a reproductive specialist, who turns out to be the long-awaited Barney's doppelganger. This is a nice subversion, and I like how Marshall and Lily indirectly make good on their bet last season. Eventually, Marshall gets worried that he actually might be the problem. So, to make him feel better, Lily invites his parents to come over. All is said and done, and by the end of the episode, it feels as though the title was kind of misleading. Until we're delivered by an absolute gut punch of an ending.
Man, I really hate to just leave this here, but I promise I'll cover this at a later date. But as for now, Marshall's dad suddenly dies, and the next episode is the whole funeral and how Marshall tries to cope with it.
Season 6, Episode 15, Oh Honey. The entirety of this episode takes place through phone calls as the gang tell Marshall what's been going on. Overall, a much needed lighter episode, which ends off with Ted and Zoe getting together. I give this episode a great.
So do I still hate Zoe? She's growing a bit on me, but I don't know. But in the end, this is Ted's first girlfriend since Season 4, so good for him.
Season 6, Episode 16, Desperation Day. It's the day before Valentine's, and instead of trying to hook up with some girl, Barney instead falls in love with one of Robin's coworkers, Nora. They seem to hit it off, but Barney realizes he can't use his usual tricks to get with her, and instead has to actually commit. Always nice to see that more lovey-dovey side of Barney, and from here on out, he tries to pursue Nora. Pretty Ted-like, if you ask me. Coupled by the B-plot, I give this episode a great. Season 6, Episode 17, Garbage Island. This episode takes place in 2021, where Ted runs into Wendy the waitress at an airport.
It's funny how I Met Your Mother was very off in terms of telling the future.
I like this episode for multiple reasons. Firstly, because it shows Marshall going back to his roots and deciding to go environmental again, and the fact that the show never forgets its side characters. Everyone has different lives, and it was cool to see a somewhat recurring character, Wendy, get a happy ending. I give this episode a great. Season 6, Episode 18, A Change of Heart. Barney still has his heart set on Nora, and although he doesn't want to admit it, he thinks he actually has a future with her, but he has to wait a bit longer before he can get with her. This reiterates that Barney does have a soft side, but he has to go through something else in order to access it. I give this episode a good. Season 6, episode 19, Legendaddy, and season 6, episode 21, Hopeless.
So I didn't plan on covering these 2 episodes in this review. Until I realized there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So I have to do another separate video as well for these series of episodes. I know, I apologize for doing this again. But I promise it'll be worth it by the time it comes out.
I'll say 2 things though. First, Ted's new house is coming together pretty nicely. And I really love the different opening in episode 21. It's definitely something I wish they did more often in the show. Season 6, episode 20, the exploding meatball sub. After many, many years, Marshall finally wants to live out his dreams of becoming an environmental lawyer and quits GNB. He gets a job at NRDC, but he doesn't really get paid. Despite that, it's still pretty admirable. I give this episode a good. Season 6, episode 22, The Perfect Cocktail. Zoe is able to take the whole Arcadian deal to court, where they can truly decide whether or not to keep the Arcadian. So to retaliate, Ted takes Zoe to the Arcadian to truly prove to her that there's no point in keeping it rusting there forever. However, we finally learn the reason why Zoe wants to defend it, which is because she used to live there with her family when they were broke. And after leaving the hotel due to another run-in with the cockamouse, miss you my guy, Ted finally agrees with Zoe. I give this episode a good. Season 6, episode 23, Landmarks. At long last, it's Judgment Day. Basically the day where you find out that Arcadian will be just destroyed or not. And even though Ted was set on keeping it, he makes a last minute decision to go back to GNB's side after finding out that Barney would get fired. More importantly though, he realizes that New York is ever changing, and in order to keep changing, you sometimes have to throw the old away. But as a last minute Hail Mary by Zoe, she replays a tape that she got from Ted in episode 8.
Maybe I'll make it a douchebag certificate for Zoe. I'm gonna write that down.
However, that doesn't work, as the gang in GNB remove the lion's head, which is why the Arcadian was so iconic in the first place, thus ending the seasonal debate with Ted as the winner, which means he sadly breaks up with Zoe. But on the bright side, he can finally accomplish his dream. This is a really great episode. Just seeing Ted get the sweet justice that he needed and seeing Zoe fail is always super satisfying to watch.
Okay, I don't hate Zoe as much as other characters, but she makes very, very mean decisions that I don't agree with. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about
the season 6 finale, Challenge Accepted. Despite everything that Zoe has done to Ted in the past season, he almost tries to get back with her. Come on, Ted, I tried to defend you, but you can't keep doing this stuff, man, come on. Luckily though, he's stopped by Robin and Barney, and realizes one of the most important life lessons in the entire show. He learns that he just can't keep running back to the past because it's safe, because then he'll never grow. Instead, breaks the future head on. Meanwhile, after Marshall comes back from a horrible interview, he reflects on the horrible year he just had. From his dad dying, from his career life, and not being able to have a baby, he's mostly being mentally drained. But alas, Marshall finally has a glimmer of hope as he finds out that Lily is pregnant, giving hope that the rest of the year might not be that bad. This season ends off with a scene of Barney meeting up with Nora again. I forgot to mention that they left each other on pretty bad terms. And we cut back to the same scene from the start of the season of Ted going to meet the groom. And no, it didn't turn out to be punchy, but instead, it was Barney choosing out a tie for the wedding. Now, the only question is why the bride?
God damn it, did I really write why instead of who? Cut that out.
Who is the bride? Well, of course, we will find out in season 7.
This season is one of the most well-rounded seasons and has so much to offer. When I was reviewing season 5, it felt like it was just too much filler, and the story-specific episodes didn't even have much to offer either way. But this season, it improved on that tenfold. The standalone episodes were so much more unique and fun, and the story-specific episodes, I didn't even talk about most of them, but they were really good. This season had some absolute classics like BLITZGIVING and False Positive, which featured some of my favorite side characters like the Blitz or James's dad. Overall, a lot better than season 5, and even then, season 5 was pretty good. And the epithet of the season, I call it daddy issues, might seem out of place, but really think about it. All of the most important episodes of the season have to do something about dads. And if you really think about it, all the people in the gang's dads play a huge role in one way or another in the show. So I guess they all really do have daddy issues. And speaking of the gang, I know, awesome transition. It's time to talk about their roles in the season. And might just add, in past seasons, it's obvious which characters get more development than others, which is pretty clear here as well. However, it feels like there was no real character that was truly sidelined in the season, and they all played a major role in every major event in the season.
And of course, let's start off with the man himself, Ted. His character arc mostly stems from his career yet again, but this time it directly ties into his love life, which I find to be a very interesting take for this season. Obviously, GMB helps him to finally accomplish his dream, but what I like about this was Ted was fully content with not doing this job. It's very mature of him to be happy about what he's doing now, and what seemed like a last resort job a season ago, it really blossomed into something that he really enjoys doing. But still, I'm really glad he did take this opportunity, albeit it wasn't exactly what he was looking for. And of course, this is when Zoe comes in and truly tests Ted. She introduces a whole new level where Ted has to decide which is better for him at the moment, his career or his love life. He was truly challenged, but always kept in line with his character. And the decision he made in the end reflects on how much he's changed in season 1, where before, all he wanted was love from his significant other, but realizes that he holds another special type of love for architecture.
And as for Zoe, I'm still kind of mixed about her. She went from hateable at the start to kind of sympathizable in the midway, and then completely loses me by the end with the tape. One thing I will say though, I probably like her more than Stella, just because she connects with the gang a lot more than she did.
Switching things up a bit, as for Robin, she doesn't get off with the best start, but she quickly finds her way back and redeems herself by taking a risk and taking a job at Worldwide News. She knew beforehand that she won't get paid, but regardless, she still believes she can build herself up to the point where she can make a career out of it. She knew the odds were stacked against her, and Sandy Rivers works there as well, but in the end, I'm quite proud of what she accomplishes during this season. Now, Lily may not seem like she went through a lot, but quite honestly, she was responsible for making sure Marshall was in check for over half the season. Obviously, experiencing death of a loved one is tragic, but sometimes it's just as hard for people around you to help just because they don't know how it feels like for them, and overall makes it harder for them to find ways to help. It's just another test for her to make sure that her significant other gets the help he needs. And seeing her try, it really makes you glad that Marshall has that someone in his life. There is also the whole pregnancy storyline, which really kicks in next season, so I bet I'll talk about her more next time. And now, we arrive at the two characters with the biggest spotlight on them this season, Barney and Marshall. And both of their storylines involve their dad, Barney meeting and letting his father into his life, and a tragic passing of Marshall's father. Sadly, I wasn't able to go in depth with either of those episodes, but there's more than enough I can talk about as of right now. As early as the second episode, it's obvious that Barney's lack of a father figure will be explored in this season, and in those episodes, we'll see a completely different side of Barney that we never got to see. And this will completely alter him as a character after he confronts his father. And this is proven by the fact that Barney falls in love with another character, Nora, who, might add, is just a really cool character and such a good match for Barney. I feel as though his character has truly made a complete 180 compared to the previous 5 seasons. And there's a specific scene in this season that reflects that. But I'll talk about that another time. Oh, and I can't forget about Marshall. So continuing the streak of bad years, we end off with Marshall, who had a particularly bad one. Of course, the whole baby endeavors were put on hold as he learned about his father's death, and only now he tries to truly commit to being an environmental lawyer, which seems to not be going so well. And damn, by the end of the season, you can truly tell how emotionally drained he is.
Marshall is usually the voice of reason and the character everyone looks to when they need emotional support. But he truly can't take it anymore and looks like he's in the same state as he was early on in season 2 when Lily broke up with him. You know what's weird? Ted, Robin, and Marshall all have their respective season where they go through the most development, and it's all in a row. And it would seem like it could be repetitive by now. But the writers bring up new and unique ways to go through their troubles, which seem really realistic for them and not just shoehorned in. Marshall is known as the most morally good person in the group. However, everyone has their moments of weakness. But of course, this only makes these type of characters stronger as a result. And that's another season in the books. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and let me know your thoughts on season 6 in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe because it really helped me grow my channel and bring quality videos in the future. And that about does it. Well everyone, this is the glass half full. And I'll see you next time.
Mm-hmm.